I spent an entire year waking up at 5 a.m., taking cold showers, gratitude journaling, meditating, going to the gym, and it was a waste of my time. Not in the way you think. I made a shit ton of gains. I actually became disciplined. I became happier. I started to cut out my own bad habits. But what was the point? I spent ages grinding just to get treated the same as everybody else. I meditated to improve my focus, but I didn't even use that focus for anything. There was just absolutely zero point. I always had this dream of moving to Thailand, waking up early, doing kickboxing and MMA with the full morning routine and everything. But instead of building that life, I just pretended to have that life. Not literally, of course, but I would make my routine as close as possible to my dream life instead of working on the goals which would actually get me there. So, for example, I would like have the full morning routine. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., I'd meditate, I'd like go gratitude journal, like coach out, all of that. But the thing is, I wasn't working on the goals that would build me up to that dream life. I had this vague idea of wanting to start a business, but I never knew what I wanted to do. And when I had an idea, I would just research it and never actually start. I still felt the same no matter how hard I grinded. So instead of taking my anger out like a normal person, I would take it out in the gym. And I shit you not, I would literally hit quadruple drop sets. Consistently, not just a one off thing. I hit quadruple drop sets in the gym. That meant I would go one set till failure, then I would drop the weight and go to failure again, and then I would drop the weight and go to failure again, and then I would drop the weight and go to failure again, and then I would do it again. One more time. That's the equivalent of doing 5 sets in one, and I did that for 4 sets in one workout of like I didn't do this for all exercises, of course, but I did it with like my overhead extensions, right? In one workout, I hit 20 sets because I was doing 4 sets of that shit. The equivalent of 20 sets. You know what the scientifically most optimal per week is to like grow muscle? It was like 10 to 20 sets is like the maximum amount of volume you can do before you start to lose gains. I was doing the equivalent of 20 sets per workout. I would be so burnt out during my workouts that I would literally fall asleep in between sets. And I had this David Goggins mindset that like harder equals better. And while it ruined my mental health, I actually built a pretty killer physique. Cut to around 6 months of living this life, and I was burnt out, tired, exhausted, and my cortisol was like through the roof. And I just wanted comfort so badly. I literally have this memory where it was in the morning, right? And I woke up at like 5 a.m. I did like this crazy long cold shower. And then I went outside to gratitude journal shirtless. By the way, this is like 5:15 in the morning. Like when it's like freezing cold, the sun hasn't even rose yet. I'm freezing my balls off, and I think like, oh, cold is good for you because I'm just a fucking retard at the time. So I'm sitting out there, I'm freezing my balls off, and then I go inside, and I'm so cold, but I refuse to put a jumper on because I think like, oh, the cold shower benefits come from when your body heat has to heat itself up. So if I stay colder for longer, I'll be more awake. Which, while it was true, it was just like 80-20 rule, right? That's like 80% of the work for like 1% of the results. So I was just being a dumbass, right? And I was so cold, I just gave up. That day, I just couldn't give a fuck, right? So I I was so tired. There's like this heater built into the wall of my room, right? It's like one of those like gas ones where you like turn it on and it like blows hot air at you. I literally stood by there. I like grabbed this blanket. I just cuddled up by there, and I was like, I just want comfort. I just want comfort. That's the phrase that kept on repeating in my head at this time because I was just so tired and burnt out of like this like disciplined David Goggins lifestyle. 4 or 5 months or so go by, and the summer holidays are around the corner again. And I have this dream in my head of going to train MMA almost every day. You see, during this entire self improvement journey, there has been a one thing that I've just absolutely loved, and that's martial arts. I first started with wrestling, which was extremely stressful, but I loved training. So after the school season ended, I started training Krav Maga. The reason why I started with Krav Maga was because back then, when I lived in Australia, my brother trained Krav. And one time I went to a lesson there, and despite being the skinny little twink I was back then, who watched YouTube for 6+ hours a day, I actually enjoyed it a lot. So a couple times a week I was training Krav, and eventually once a week I would train with my friend in this famous gym. But the problem was I could only train once per week there, given it was an hour drive away after school because of traffic. And it was closed on weekends. However, during the holidays I can go more. The only problem is that my mum, reasonably so, doesn't want to drive that far every day. So I started looking for other gyms I could train at. That's when I found a gym that didn't do any striking but only grappling. If you don't know, striking in MMA is basically like all the punches, all the kicks, like elbows and knees and stuff, while the grappling is like the takedowns, the chokes, and all of that. And because of my background in wrestling, I was actually pretty good at grappling, and I would always clip my friends who sparred with me, so naturally I preferred it way more. I decided to start training there every single day I could, but at this point I also started club wrestling 3 times per week. So the other 4 days of the week I would go to BJJ. If you don't know, BJJ stands for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is basically, it's the same thing as grappling. I fell in love with the BJJ and I finally set my first real goal, to win a BJJ tournament. Up until this point, all of my goals have been completely retarded. They were all so vague, and one of them, which I've still written on my wall today, was triceps plus lats. I could hit 1 set of tricep pushdowns and 1 set of pull-ups, and I could have technically hit the goal. For the first time in my life, I was actually purpose-focused, and I respected myself more than ever. I truly felt disciplined and masculine for the first time in my life. I centered my entire life around BJJ, and everything I did was built around it, and I've never felt better in my life up until this point. Around the same time, I also started high school. And because this entire time I'd been lifting hard in the gym, that first impression I had actually carried me, and I had a pretty good social life for the first time ever. Of course, I still had zero social skills, so eventually I was back where I was before in the social hierarchy. But it goes to show how much discipline can change your life. Actually becoming purpose-focused instead of just doing the good habits and hoping for your life to get better changed my life. And if there's one takeaway you can get from this video, let it be this. Self-improvement is meant to be an aid to your goals, not the actual goals themselves. If your goal is to make 2K per month like it is for me, no amount of meditation or gratitude journaling or cold showers is going to do that for you. However, doing those things can help you be more productive, which can in turn help you hit those goals. I hope this video helped you guys out. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.